Welcome to Assistant on Air, where we have conversations with the people that build for the Google Assistant. I'm Luke Davis, a developer product engineer for Actions on Google. Today, we'll be chatting with Kathy Pearl. Hi, Kathy. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
So I'm the head of conversation design outreach at Google. And what that means is I go out in the world and I talk to people about what is conversation design, why it's important, and best practices for how to do it well.
I remember watching last year's I.O., right? And seeing the duplex demo, right? And after the fact, I was thinking about duplex and how interesting it was, how compelling it was. And that it wasn't actually the speech, it was the pauses, right? And even now, a year on, having had this realization, I don't think that I've incorporated that idea into the voice user interfaces that I've built. I don't see that being done very broadly, but when I see it done, it has such an interesting impact.
Yeah, related to that, sometimes we'll get feedback where someone says, oh, users said it's too fast. We have to slow down the TTS.
Yeah.
And we say, hold on. Often the issue is really not the speed, which was created specifically at the correct rate of normal human speech patterns. It's often, like you said, the breath patterns. A TTS, a computer doesn't have to take breaths.
Right.
So you can just keep having it talk and talk and talk and talk. But that's hard for people to listen to.
Sure.
And so you do have to break it up in these more natural ways. I'm thinking about pausing. We carry a lot of information in silence. When we're having a conversation, the time between our turns is like blink of an eye. It's 200 milliseconds.
Wow.
But if you wait longer than that, that is information. So if I say to you, hey, can I have a ride on Friday? And you pause for more than 1 second,
yeah.
Guess what? You probably don't want to give me a ride.
That's
and so
really
even though it's your turn, I'll probably take my turn back and say, oh, okay, you're probably busy. And you didn't say anything. You just paused for 1 second.
Wow.
And that's something that is very hard for computers to do right now. And so again, as a conversation designer, you're taking what you know about the way humans speak, but you're cramming it into a very low signal. Right. All you get are the words. You don't get eye gaze, you don't get body language, you don't get pauses, you don't get very good intonation. So you're having to cram all this meaning into just the words. And that is where it takes some skill to really think about how can we take how humans talk, but actually implement it with the real technology that exists today.
Wow, that is super interesting. I've that the messaging of the silence is something that I have totally not thought about when building these things before. I guess part of it is that I'm very visually oriented, despite the fact that I have to wear glasses. There's in that prior, that assumption that all the important information in interaction is going to be visual, right? It's very little of it's going to be auditory, is a thing that I actually feel kind of is handicapping my ability to approach these things. You happen to know a lot more than I do about this world of accessibility. Do you happen to have any numbers on this that you can share with us?
So there are about 285 million visually impaired folks in the world.
Wow.
And as you say, one of the things when I think about designing for accessibility is this idea of inclusive design, which is that at some point or another, we all have impairments. Whether it's, I don't have my reading glasses and I can't read the text message on my phone. Or I'm carrying in some groceries and I temporarily can't use my hands.
Right.
Or I fell and broke my arm. There's all these parts and things happening in our lives where we ourselves are impaired. And so I think of it more as we're designing really for everybody. We might think of it with someone who maybe has motor or mobility impairments or visual or hearing impairments or cognitive impairments. But we all have ranges of, say, memory loss. And so to me, it's really building for everyone in the world. And voice has really started to take off in this arena of really being helpful to people. So you can imagine, of course, things for visually impaired folks, whether it's being able to choose their music more easily, be able to call the pharmacy without having to go through more laborious steps. Even I was watching a video about someone talking about he's visually impaired and how he uses the Google Assistant. He was saying he can use his phone, which has accessibility options to do things like set a timer. But what's really hard is to find out how much time is left in the timer. Something we very much take for granted. but is harder if you're visually impaired. But now he can just ask, how much time is left in the timer? And these kind of benefits, I think, are just amazing.
That's really cool. I had no idea that it was over 250 million people.
Yeah, I know. It's really a lot more than we might think of.
Since I have you here, there's something that I wanted to ask you about with regards to like some of the things you did before you came to Google. So you worked at a couple of companies doing voice user interface things before, but this was in the era before we used like NLU sorts of like really heavy NLU sorts of things with like deep neural nets and all the like fancy like new buzzwords. And my suspicion, though I need you to confirm or falsify this, my suspicion is that the abstractions that you used in those contexts, right, when you're dealing with some kind of like phone system, or you worked on a medical system as well, right? Like that the abstractions, that the key ideas, the things that you talked about a lot, those were different than the things that we talk about now, where we have a much more flexible way to interpret user utterances. Can you speak to that at all? Like,
I think people might be surprised about how many things. So it's almost 20 years to the day that I started working at a company called Nuance Communications.
That's so cool.
On automated phone systems, which was, where speech recognition was first mainstream, first made available to the public, calling your bank or your airline or things like that. And I spent a long time there really learning the ins and outs of how to craft these conversational interfaces. And it's true, the technology was not as good. The speech recognition was not as good. The natural language understanding was not as good. We had to handcraft our grammar. So for example, if we asked the user a yes/no question, like, do you want to book this flight? I had to handwrite like, please, yes, yeah, like all of the things that could possibly come out of the caller's speech. But honestly, so many of the best practices we learned back then still apply to our voice user interfaces and conversational systems today. And I think sometimes people feel like, oh, it's all brand new, it's so different, we don't have to think about those ancient automated phone systems. But in fact, we learned all sorts of things about how to present information, how to confirm information, how to make the user comfortable, all these different things that in many ways really still apply.
Can you talk about that confirmation bit a little bit more?
So one of the things about when we're talking to somebody else, we have a habit of knowing when and how to confirm information. So if you're at the bank and you're like, I want to, withdraw $500,
right,
the bank teller's going to say $500, is that right? Or something like that, and make sure that they really have it correct. So that kind of thing where you stop and force the person to either say like a yes or a no, that's called an explicit confirmation. I'm saying, oh, you want to go to Austin? Is that right? And I'm waiting. I'm not going to do anything until you've either told me, yep, that's right, or no, that's no, it's actually Boston. Now, if it's something that is maybe not quite as important, like you just said, what's the weather in San Francisco? If we get it wrong, it's not the end of the world. I might just say, okay, San Francisco. So I am repeating what I heard from you, but I'm not stopping the conversation to say, did I get that right? I'm just saying, okay, San Francisco. So you heard implicitly.
Right.
I heard what you said.
Right.
And then you could say, no, I really meant, Santa Clara or something like that.
Interesting.
So those are the implicit versus explicit models of confirmation. And to have a really good conversational interface, you want to apply them in the right place at the right time. So you don't always want to do explicit. You don't always want to do implicit. It depends on the situation at hand, which one you want to use.
This feels like a kind of cousin to error handling to me. Is there a similar sort of abstraction in conversation design to error handling in programming?
Yeah, for sure. I think what's similar about it is that what you're getting at is that it's this idea of making sure the person feels understood. Just like when we're having a conversation, if you're saying something to me and I've kind of got a confused look on my face, even if I don't speak, you'll probably repeat yourself or say, oh, did you know what I meant by that thing? Yeah. It's really important throughout a conversation to make sure the other person is on the same page. Now, you don't wait till the end. Like we don't wait till the end of this whole thing and I say, I didn't understand that second thing you said. No, I'm going to give you some feedback that, I didn't understand something earlier. And we call that repair. So repair, error handling, kind of similar, but repair is a little nicer because, if I was saying, oh, I was talking to Luke last night, we had 3 errors in our conversation. I wouldn't say that because we're so good at repair and recovering when we don't understand each other. And so to build a really great action, if you have good repair, similarly, you can get things back on track. So something about voice user interfaces and natural language in particular that's different than, say, a mobile app or something visual is that when someone taps a button or swipes, you know what they did. with voice and natural language, it's a little more of sort of an educated guess. We're pretty sure what you said, but because of this, and because of the huge variety in the way that people ask for things, we have to do a lot more of error handling or repair, where people are going to say things we did not expect. Even if you're an expert in this space, you'll design your system, you will still be surprised by the ways that people say things. Like, I used to work on a health app, and it was a symptom checker, and you can only imagine how many ways someone can say abdominal pain. I mean, so many different ways to say that I couldn't anticipate. So I had to do more data gathering. But the point is, when things go off track, because they will, you got to help the user get back. There's something called the cooperative principle, which basically says that when we're having a conversation, we are really trying to succeed. I'm not trying to talk too much or too little. I'm not trying to use words that maybe you wouldn't be familiar with. Your user really wants to succeed with your action. Help them. So if they say something you didn't expect, don't just say, I didn't understand. What are they going to do with that? They're going to have no idea how to recover, how to move on. So you might say, oh, did you want dark chocolate or milk chocolate? You get another error. You might say, I need to know what kind of chocolate you want. You give them more information. So help them. Don't just left them out in the dark, because they're trying, and you want to help them get back on track.
So in a normal application I might build, right? Like when I throw an error, like that bubbles up to something that like maybe usually it like makes my program crash, right? But we want to do a different thing here. And it sounds like what you're saying is like maybe the default posture that we should have when building these things is, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that when we face some ambiguity on the side of the action in terms of interpreting the user, what we should do is like maybe fall back to exposing the capabilities of the action at that point in the conversation. Is that approximately right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think one reason we try to use the word repair rather than error handling is because, like you said, in programming, error handling has a very specific connotation.
Right.
And here we're just saying you had an unexpected user response. You're going to repair the conversation by giving them context-sensitive information. Sometimes I see people say, oh, I've got a fallback intent, we're good to go. And they have one for the entire action.
You mean that's not good enough? I need to go rewrite some things real fast.
And what we really need is the person needs help at each turn in the conversation. So if you're asking about X, then your repair, your fallback needs to address that particular thing. Because over here, they might be thinking about a totally separate thing. And one other thing I'll say that's really important that a lot of people overlook is this idea of adjacent responses. So let's say you're booking a table at a restaurant, and I say, how many people in your party? Now you've built your responses to include, between 1 and 20 people or whatever. But I might say, well, do you have outdoor seating? So I didn't say like a random thing. I didn't suddenly say like, what's the average temperature of Antarctica? Because people don't talk that way. They don't just randomly throw in tents out all over the place. But I'll say something similar, like I want to know more about the seating. And so you should be able to handle those types of things in your conversation.
Would you, to go back to the repair bit a little bit, would you recommend actually having a fallback intent for each like specific context inside the conversation? Is that generally like the best practice that you see? Yeah,
for sure. And I know that's some extra work, but really it's a really crucial part of design and of building these things because, again, no matter how careful you are, people are just going to be people. They're going to speak the way they speak. They might not hear the question. They might be busy talking to someone else. They might not understand the question. They might say it in a way you didn't expect. It's going to happen. And again, if you can swiftly get them back on track, sometimes I've seen usability testing where I'll say, well, what did, when that error happened, what did you think? And they're like, what error? Because you guided them so nicely. It was just part of the conversation. It wasn't like error. So it's worth spending some time on.
Thank you so much for coming to join us today, Kathy. We hope you liked today's show. If you have suggestions for future episodes, let us know in the comments below. Follow us on Twitter for updates and new episodes. I've been Luke Davis. Chat with you next time.